Okay, we are recording. Tania, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you so much.
So this is really strange. I was saying to Adam. So this is the first time I've ever had a couple on a podcast, and the format of the podcast doesn't lend itself to having sort of two guests. I've done it a couple of times where I've had like two guests on at the same time, and I think because the idea of the podcast is a bit of a kind of life story and a deep dive into your journey
Mhm.
to this point. It's quite hard to go, oh yes, okay, all right, yeah, great. And so what was yours? And so it kind of I was like, do you know what? I'm so used to seeing you both together in on YouTube and on the podcast. I thought, right, no, I'm gonna say them both come on, but let's split it up. So we do this as like a double episode. So I'm super excited for this one. And
No,
and
thank you so much for no, thank you so much for having us. And also, I have to just say straight off the bat, I have major imposter syndrome right now because I don't know what the hell I'm doing here when you interview such
I'm
amazing guests, such big names. It genuinely blows my mind. But here we are, and I'm just really excited to
absolutely.
be here. So thank you.
The idea of this podcast was always to be to chat to interesting, creative people about their journey. And I have been inspired by many musicians that I've had on this podcast and many actors that I've had on, but none more so than how inspired I've been of late by watching you and Adam's adventures on
Oh,
YouTube and hearing you speaking to the retirement rebel and these people on the podcast that have inspired me.
mm.
And I said to Adam at the beginning of his episode, today at 4 p.m., I'm going to look to buy my camper today. Um,
Yes.
and then if all goes to plan, then in a couple of weeks I'm going to have my first adventure, and I can't wait. And it's something that I've wanted to do for years and years and years. And again, not to sort of repeat myself too much, but I said to Adam, I'm 50 in a couple of months, and it's like I'm going to do it. I've spent years
Yeah.
wild swimming and doing lots of things like that, and it's like I've always wanted to camper, and it was just watching your adventures and just made it seem. And I mean this in such a complimentary way. Uh, it made it seem like it was doable,
Yeah.
and knowing that neither of you had vast experience of van life, and it was
Mm.
something that we spoke to Adam about. And for listeners now that have started with this episode, Adam's episode would have been out this week as well. So uh, then there may be a little crossover, but we spoke to Adam about how they come to get jitters or jits, that the camper van that they've spent the last 3 or so years living in, and it's a beautiful story of how that come about, and it's led to a really fitting and beautiful life, doing jitters justice and continuing the adventures and the beautiful story. Um, but all of that aside, let's start your playlist, Tanya, and I'm going to ask you
Great.
to tell me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
Of course, this is such a difficult question. And originally, I was going to go with Supermassive Black Hole by Muse because that is
Okay.
just such a strong intro. And I always felt like if that could be the theme of your life, of yes, I've arrived, I'm here, and it could give you that boost of confidence, I think it's brilliant. But I'm actually going to say Sympathy for the Devil, the live version by the Rolling Stones. And the reason I've picked this is it's because it's a song that's been with me all throughout my life, early childhood. My mom had me when she was 18, and she raised me as a single mom. And she always, she always had music around when I was growing up, and Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, Def Leppard, that was always the music that was constantly in the house. And I remember specifically with Sympathy for the Devil, it was on TV, the live version was being replayed on TV, and my mom asked me to record it on the cassette. I think at the time, I mean, all growing up, really, we only ever had access to two channels. So whenever we wanted to enjoy something again, we'd always record it. So I recorded it on the cassette tape, and I just kept playing it over and over and over again, since I was really, really young. And it's still I just still remember seeing Mick Jagger coming up from underneath the floor of the stage, and it's just a belter, and I love it. So that's the one I'm going to go for.
That's a fantastic choice. And Supermassive Black Hole. No one's ever chose that either. And it's like, that's like, no one's, somebody's chose Satisfaction by the Stones, I think. And I think maybe someone has chose Jumping Jack Flash, but no one's chose Sympathy for the Devil yet, which seems bananas, seeing as we've done over 400 episodes of this. And the same with Supermassive Black Hole. It's like, and do you know what? The two things that both of them, they're very different bands, obviously, Muse and the Stones, but both of them songs are arguably the two songs by both of them bands that have got more groove than anything else they've done. Because Muse just generally just really just have it and rock, and it's quite sort of big, huge rock. But Supermassive Black Hole, for me, I think it sounds a bit like Prince. It's got such a groove to it. And the same with Sympathy for the Devil. All the Stone stuff's quite bluesy rock and roll, but that's just as soon as you get in bongos and like in like, and you see Jagger as well. Like when you get the visual, it's just
the performance. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Like, have you ever managed to see the Stones live?
No, that would be a dream. No, and I think that if I ever got the chance to, I'd have to bring my mom. There would be no other way. She would disown me if I didn't.
I was so lucky. I got to see them maybe 15 years ago, and it was meant to be at Wembley, and I think they were just doing some work on Wembley, so they moved it to Twickenham. And I'm not a huge Stones fan. I just like all the hits, and you know, and oh my God, it was just. I remember the lights went down, and this little light just lit up Keith Richards, and he started playing the opening bars to Jumping Jack Flash, and it was like, oh my God. And then Mick Jagger comes strutting out full kind of peacock, and he did not stop. And he's about 130, and he didn't stop for like, it must have been 2.5 hours. It was absolutely incredible. And he's still doing it. Like, amazing. Absolutely amazing.
You gotta wonder, like, where is he getting this energy from? And yeah, it just, I mean, all of them, to be fair, but him in particular, how they command the stage, it's just hypnotizing.
Yeah. So you mentioned you grew up with your mum as a single parent. Where was that? Where was you born?
So I was born in Mexico. My whole family is from Mexico, and I was raised in Ireland. So when I was 7, my mom and I moved to Ireland, and through several course of events, we ended up living there, you know, until I went off and worked abroad. But it's a strange one, because sometimes when you are born in a different country and raised in a different culture, there's this kind of internal struggle of your identity. Because whilst whenever anyone asks where you're from, I'll always say I'm Irish. I'm from Ireland. That is the culture that I identify myself with the most. Ireland gave me so many opportunities that I would have never had access to having grown up in Mexico. And so for me, I identify myself as Irish. However, you know, because I wasn't born there, especially when you're younger, when you grow up, when I was younger, say I was bullied in school because I looked different, because I sounded different, because my accent wasn't, you know, fully Irish, and all of that. And then obviously Mexican culture is amazing. The music, the food, the people, the colors, all of it. And I like to identify myself as Mexican sometimes, but I also feel like I haven't earned the title, because even though that is the country I was born in, I haven't spent enough time there. So it's a very interesting one, and it has conjured up a lot of, particularly recently, just a lot of thoughts and reflections of what identity is, and kind of who am I, and what am I made up from, if that makes sense.
Do you think there are things that have started to kind of maybe present themselves more in your mind just as you've got like older?
Yeah, I think so. I think you know, as Adam and I look to the future and think about our, you know, starting a family potentially, you know, in the future, I think about that child's identity, and they will be born into you know, an English father, and then I feel really strongly about giving birth in Ireland, because again, going back to all of the opportunities that Ireland gave me, feeling like Ireland is my home,
Yeah.
but also there is that heritage of the rich Mexican culture that I haven't spent a lot of time delving into. And Mexico is a country that Adam and I want to travel to. We want to make our travel films about. I want to really delve into the history and the culture. And I guess, like all things, you appreciate that even more when you're an adult. So I think now, as I'm getting older, yes, I am reflecting more on identity, and also how am I going to pass down that culture to my child, because I want them to know about the history of their ancestors, and you know, their kind of their bloodline, but also very much proud for them to spend time in and to grow up in Ireland, or you know, and have that Irish culture as well as England, of course.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag.
Absolutely. And as a lover of wild swimming, Tania, you need to ensure you've swum in them snow aids, because they're the absolute mecca of wild swimming. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever done, and it's one of the most beautiful places I've been is Mexico. And the snow aids are just the most ridiculous things to swim in. They're just absolutely, they're just something from a science fiction film. Right. Okay. Let's take you back. For track 2, can you please tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please?
I'm going to go with Streets of Philadelphia by Bruce Springsteen. Again, Bruce was someone who was, you know, my mom would play around the house. And I think it's just the lyrics of this song are very reflective, very poetic, obviously quite sad. And, you know, I grew up as an only child, and also when I was in school, I was also, you know, like many people do, I experienced bullying. And so it was always a song that made me emotional, made me cry. Last night, listened to it preparing for this in tears, because it's, I don't know, it just conjures up a lot of emotion. And I guess the feeling that comes up for me is, I guess, the feeling of feeling lonely, or appreciating that you're walking this life alone. And yeah, I guess it's hard to summarize, but yeah, it does make me emotional.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about that kind of, just to sort of dig a little deeper on that feeling, you know, that sort of sense of loneliness, and because anytime I speak to guests that have kind of even just changed like city or town and having to start a new school, you know, the thought of that must just be terrifying. But to find yourself in a completely different country and surrounded by a completely different culture, like how difficult was that at such a formative age?
It was really hard, because when I came to Ireland, again, I was 7 and I didn't speak a word of English. All I knew was to say yes and no. I didn't even know my name is. And I remember being in the schoolyard on my first day, and the kids running up to me and saying all sorts to me. They probably were asking me basic questions like, what's your name? Where are you from? You know, whatever. And all I did was say, at first I said yes. They all laughed and then ran away and brought a bigger group of kids. And I remember there just being just like just a horde of kids asking me things. And then I thought, okay, well, if I said yes the first time and they laughed at me, then the answer must be no. And then I said no. You know, It's really interesting though, because within 6 months I was fluent in English. Again,
Wow.
a testament to how quickly kids can pick up a new language. And so I was really fortunate in that. But it was difficult coming into a different culture. Also because, the life that I was born into and raised in initially in Mexico, we're not in any way rich, not even middle class. And I think real working class, I mean, I think it would be fair to say I come from a poor background, if you want to put it that way. And being from a poor background in Mexico is tough, and it was very tough on my mom. And so growing up in Ireland, where it was just my mom and I, and we had to, she worked extremely hard. She it wasn't easy, and I was surrounded by other kids who had it a lot easier than me. They had a normal childhood, and so I think that was a cultural shock, especially just in general. If you compare Mexico to Ireland, off the back of the Celtic Tiger, and it was just a completely different world, and trying to navigate the world when all the other kids around me had a lot more than I did, or I would get bullied because of the shoes that I would wear because they weren't fashionable, or
Yeah.
they're just practical, or it does affect you when you're younger. But I think really where I came into my own was when I started university. I think
Yeah.
that was I started to really feel like I could be like myself.
Yeah. Okay. We'll pick back up on that in a moment, but let's for track three. I'm going to take you back to the more sort of formative years of school and ask you to tell me the song that soundtracked your time at school, please.
So I'm picking Snow by Red Hot Chili Peppers. I think Red Hot Chili Peppers was just a band that was always around in my school days, and in particular because the boys that I used to hang around with, in the group of friends, they would always share like CDs with the girls, etc. And this was very much the case. And yeah, I just think it's a brilliant song. It was always playing, and yeah, listening back to it, it really takes me back to my school days.
And not so much the sort of the infant school days and when you first come over. By the time you got to sort of secondary school, um,
Mhm.
did you have sort of did you have any idea what you wanted to do, like what you wanted to be?
Yes, actually, I was really convinced that one day I was going to be an entrepreneur. That was what I wanted from the get-go. I'm pretty sure I still had notebooks when I was maybe like 9 and 10, and I would write that in. I loved the idea of making something out of myself in terms of like a business. Again, I think it was coming from Mexico and feeling like landing in Ireland was our golden ticket. And it was, I guess it was a life that I wouldn't have otherwise had I stayed in Mexico, because if I had
Yeah,
stayed in Mexico, I would have never learned English. I would have never had access to third level education in the way that you do in Ireland. And again, this is why I keep saying how Ireland has given so much. Ireland has free third level education. And as well as that, because of financial circumstances, I had access to grants. My master's also was essentially free because I got grants for it. So despite of our economic situation, I was given this education. And so, yeah, and now I've forgotten the question.
no, you said that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, and like
Yes, yes.
had you kind of like looked into in what kind of space did you want to do that in? What was you going to sort of excel within that?
I had absolutely no idea. I just knew that I wanted to start a business, because that would give us the kind of the financial security. And it has always been a dream of mine, and it continues to be a dream of mine, to be able to get to a place financially where I can set my mom up with something that she can call her own, and so that she doesn't have to worry and she doesn't have to stress about money. And I guess being an entrepreneur and having your own business, for me, from an early age, signified success. And in many ways, what Adam and I are doing is entrepreneurial. And what I love about it is because it's a business, but it's also really creative. And yeah, I just love that.
Was you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you got more involved in filmmaking when you started doing doing the documentary of Adam, right? When you went on your travels. But tell me a little bit about how much of a sort of creative person you was growing up.
Well, I think for me, I think like many people, the like creativity was, well, I don't want to say like beaten out of me, but that's just, you know, figure of speech. I naturally gravitated to more of the, you know, the subjects like business and maths and all of that. But you know, looking back, I was very good at art when I took up art when I was 16, for example, for my leaving cert, which I think is the equivalent of A levels. Without much kind of background, I got an A. And so I felt at that point, I was like, wow, I could have been pursuing a kind of like an artistic path. And I guess another example is when I was doing my master's, or when I was interviewing to go into my master's, you have to, you know, there's lots of people that want to get into a specific course, and they divide you into either the creative route or the account management route. And because of everything that I had done, like internships or extracurricular activities that I had taken upon myself up until that point, they said, oh, despite the fact that you wanted to go into the creative route and you want to be like an art director or a copywriter, it looks like you fit into this box of more strategic management, etc. And I think that is a good example of how as time would go on, your teachers and everyone else would guide you a different direction, despite the fact that you might have flourished and really enjoyed being creative. And so, you know, for me, before I met Adam, and the life I've had before making films on YouTube has been working in creative agencies. And so, you know, being the strategic thinker, as well as the overall kind of manager of campaigns for TV, out of home, radio, for big brands. And I get to, and I've gotten to work with lots of producers, creative directors, film directors, and that has edged me closer and closer to scratching that itch of creativity, because you're working with a team that you know, creativity is at the heart of that advertising.
I'm going to ask for the next track, and then I'm going to pick back up on that, because I've got something I want to ask you about that. But I'm going to ask you first to tell me, please, Tania, the first record you remember buying from a record store.
So I'm pretty sure that it was Survivor by Destiny's Child, and of course all of the classics like Bootylicious and all of it. You can imagine me growing up, and I was, you know, 12 and 13, and yeah, Destiny's Child were just my number one go-to girl band. And I think, you know, specifically when we talk about buying an album, it was that. But I had recalled earlier that at the time I couldn't afford to buy CDs, but I would go to the local library, because the library would have the CDs there, and I would take out, I mean, I can't remember, and I was probably like things like Boyzone and Spice Girls and all of it. And another thing I remembered was that when Britney Spears came out with Hit Me Baby One More Time, I think that would have been like a few years later, there were these little gadgets that you basically played like a 30-second sound clip of each song. I don't know if anyone listening will ever remember these, but you would buy this little plastic gadget, and they would come with you could buy, the 30-second clip of NSYNC or the 30-second clip of Britney Spears, and you would have to put this mini plastic cassette into this mechanism, and it would play the songs for 30 seconds, and that was enough. But I remembered that as well. So as I was trying to think of the question.
That's almost preempting that kind of shortening and tightening of the attention span of youth, that are now, that the pop music is now being tailored for algorithms on TikTok and Spotify to, and making it happen. I sometimes ask the songwriters and stuff that I have on the podcast about the intro to the songs now, and are they shortening things now because it's so awash with music now, and everything seems to be getting smaller and faster. And I actually mentioned that to Adam as well, just saying, as YouTubers, how much attention and focus do you put on your first 10 seconds of your video, because there's constantly things on the side of the screen saying, oh, you might like this, click this, and it's like, and I'm sure you'd echo what Adam says, and it's credit to the filmmaking that you do, and how incredibly professional and brilliant it looks, that you don't compromise on clicks and compromise on, well, we've got to make it. You make these beautiful pieces of art, and I think that it's good that there's not this compromise to get. Do you know what I'm trying to say, Tania? It's like, a song shouldn't just be all focused about this quick intro at the minute, just so they get the hit rates and they get the downloads. It's like, because you're compromising the art, and I think that you get a beautiful balance of making it instantly. Pulled me in the minute that I first watched your first video, and then it just held me there, because it's beautiful what you do, and it looks so beautiful. And yeah, it's quite strange. I've sort of spoke to so many people over the years that really fire me up, like, and inspire me. But yeah, you used to have done that way more than any of my favorite bands, and it's impacted me to the point where it's literally going to change my lifestyle.
That is amazing.
So thank you. I want to talk about university now, and because from what I gather from listening to the podcast, listening to you talk on YouTube, you excelled in your career as well. And am I right in saying that you worked in a lot of major cities and kind of done very, very well? Tell me, for somebody that was experiencing bullying in the younger years, and you said a little while ago that you came into your own when you got to university. Tell me a little bit about the confidence that you got then, and ultimately that took you to where you was looking to go career-wise.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in school, my mom always put emphasis in me working hard at school and getting good grades. She always said that was my passport. She said, your education is your passport, and getting a good job, it's just so important. And she said, we're a team. It's the two of us. I go out and make money for the two of us, and your job, as well as cleaning the house and doing all of that stuff, was to get good grades. And with that, it meant that I spent time studying. I would always sit at the front of the class and put my hand up, and I would get jeered for doing so and taking genuine interest in my studies.
That's so shit, isn't it? It's so shit that culture like still exists in that to be excited and inspired and to be smart and be educated is like, what are you doing that for? It's crazy, right?
I think that's just kids, and I don't think that is ever going to change, because it's cooler to be the kids at the back of the bus, not caring about school or not caring about homework. And so I was enthusiastic about school. I was enthusiastic also about getting involved in extracurricular activities, and to be fair, I think that's why I came into my own when I started university, because in university, I was able to join different societies like the Business and Management Society, where we, organize guest speakers from around the world to come in and talk about entrepreneurship or etc. Or we had the Fashion Society, which, I got involved as being head of PR and sponsorship, and pitching to big brands like Alfa Romeo, who I pitched to sponsor our student fashion show, and they became a sponsor for 3 years. Or Vodafone, who became a sponsor as well. And so I was able to be like my nerdy, enthusiastic self without having people jeer me, because they were off doing their own thing. They were off partying if that's what they wanted to do. And instead, I was surrounded with other people that also wanted to do extracurricular stuff and got a buzz of learning new skills, like how to write, a pitch, or I would end up staying in uni in the society's office until 11 o'clock at night with my other fellow nerds, and we would find ways to we would organize a fashion show, so like getting the venue, we would have like the music acts there, and just all of these things. It just felt like more real world experience, let's say, whereas getting involved in extracurricular activities is usually not like a cool thing to do. But I did, and I felt like I was being accepted and celebrated for that, because the university loved that I was so involved. And I also felt like, I could just be myself. I went for class president, and class president isn't about a popularity contest. It's about like, oh, you get to organize events. Like, I'll do that. And so I really did feel like university, I felt so much more confident, and I was surrounded with like-minded people, and I had lots of fun as well.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that on the next question. But I think like it is school, generally through the experience of, just chatting to guests on here, it feels like you just have to kind of just get your head down and get through school. And if you find your tribe at school, you're very lucky. But for me, it's always further education where I think you kind of, got a little bit more maturity and you find your tribe, and then everything's generally all right at that point onwards. But okay, you had some fun at university. Good. Let's talk about clubbing. Track 5, the song that soundtracked your year's clubbing, please.
Yes, so this is Empire State of Mind by JC and Alicia Keys. And when I think back on this, this was just a song that was constantly playing, probably towards the end of the night. And I remember this really fondly because I wanted so badly to live in New York. I wanted so badly to get an opportunity to work there. There was just such magic. And again, for me there, I mean, just to paint a picture, in university they have like many universities, they have an Erasmus program where you can go and study abroad. And my university had the same thing. I was studying business management at the time, and they had one spot for someone from the course of 300 people to go and go and study in New York on an exchange basis. Now, this was all based on your grades. Now, contrary to what I said up earlier, that I was a studious person in school, when I got to university, I ended up being quite distracted with all this extracurricular activities, because I realized like, wow, this is real world stuff. I was doing internships. I really felt like I was alive. And so I definitely let my grades drop. I was still spending more time in the actual building of the university longer than anybody else, because I was doing all of this extra organization of different things. But my grades had dropped, which meant that I did not have a chance to go to New York because I did not get the top grades. But it was all through a very lucky incident that the person who had accepted New York couldn't take it at the very last moment. They just couldn't. And the stars aligned, and the head of my course said, Tania, you know what this means. It's like, you can take you New York if you so wish. And I couldn't believe it, because it was my absolute dream. And when I said it to my mom, she, without hesitation, she said, absolutely yes. And she gave me all of her savings, which at the time were, I think it was 10,000 euro. And she said, if you can make 10,000 euro last for 1 year while you're in New York, you can go. That is where you're taking. And I did. I went, and I also did an internship. I lived on Staten Island, which is not the city, it's much further away. I shared a tiny little room with somebody else at, paying $300 a month. But I felt like I had made that happen. And I guess that's also why it's so important. Like, this song is, I always romanticized in New York, and going there on Erasmus and studying there and doing my internship there, unpaid internships, of course, doing my internships there. It lived up to the expectation. And I went out clubbing a lot when in New York, and on a budget, because you might be familiar that in cities like New York, and I'm pretty sure like Miami, LA, etc., they let girls in, young girls in, for free. And you get to drink for free, as long as you go with promoters. So I was there with other girls from Ireland, and we would go out very often, 3 or 4 nights a week, and we would spend no more than the $20 that it would take us for the taxi home between us, because we would get all public transport to the club, and then we would enjoy ourselves for free and then come back in a taxi. So yeah, that song, before I got to New York and then during my time there, it always played, and it would always get the club going, because everyone would be in New York, and you're like, yes, this is us,
and it's a banger.
Yes.
What's interesting is, I don't know of you and Adam who deals with the budgeting when you go traveling, but you seem very, very proud that you managed to have a night's clubbing for $20. I'm just going to let you know now, Adam, when he answered this question, he used to go to a club in Falmouth, I believe, that was 12 quid to get in, and it was unlimited free drinks. He's actually more budget. He's budgeted better than you.
Oh, but how much did he spend getting home? There you go. That's the real question.
Oh, wonderful. Well, to see that story go where you seized that opportunity and then work these free internships to get where you wanted to get. Where does that drive come from?
Absolutely comes from my mom. I think her raising me at such a young age with little to absolutely no support from anybody else, and the way that she brought me up to work hard, to believe in myself and believe that anything was possible as long as I put my mind to it, and as long as I prioritize my studies. I think absolutely it came from her, because I wouldn't have the life that I do without her, and without her work ethic and how she worked multiple jobs. And she still, to this day, she's an inspiration to me in that regard. And like all things, our relationship isn't perfect by any means, but and I probably don't say it to her enough, but I am really proud of her and all of her achievements, and seeing her lift herself out of the situation and the life that she grew up in, and really and truly lifting me out of that, because she said, when I had you, I knew that I had to push you forward, and I knew that every decision that I was going to make in my life was in your best interest, and to make sure that you had a better life than I did. And I do. I speak English, and I'm educated, and I have, even before doing the traveling with Adam, I got to go on trips when we were in Ireland, and we would scrape some money together. my mom would always prioritize travel. We would, get the cheapest flights on Ryanair, and we would go for a weekend and we'd stay in hostels that were really questionable. And, we would get head lice and all of this stuff, but it was all in the name of adventure. And she said, like, travel, because travel and learn from other people and learn from other cultures, because it is such a privilege and it is not the cards that we had been dealt with initially. And so that perseverance and determination to make something out of myself, or to reach my potential, whatever that would be, that has always come from my mom. And she's always been that driving force and has believed in me.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to take you home for this track. And it's a favourite song from an artist, and I've got a feeling you've done what Adam's done. Favourite song from an artist from your home county?
No. This, you know what? Because I know that we both read it the same way. We thought you meant home country, but this actually still works as I've looked it up. So I'm picking "Taking Me to Church" by Hozier, and he's actually from Bray, which is in Dublin. So that is where I'm from, and I love this track. Again, just to bring it back to New York. When I was in Ireland, after I had finished with my studies, I was working in an office as a media planner, working on brands like Guinness, and we were putting on a live performance with Hozier. It was going to be a very intimate live performance, surprise to the people that were going to be in that pub, and we were going to record it. So we've recorded it, but we also recorded an interview with him beforehand. And the live performance was of this song. Really, I mean, it's very emotional. I mean, his vocals are incredible, and I think he's an amazing artist. But in his interview, he was asked about his journey and into his, making it as a musician and getting that big break, and what his family thought, and how up until the point of where he got his big break, his family were like really against him pursuing a career as a musician, because they said, well, you're never going to make it, you're never going to make enough money. And there was a soundbite, something that he said that really stuck with me. And he had said that if I had never tried to pursue this passion and make it into something, the regret of that would haunt me more than anything else. And he articulated it a lot better than I just did. But I kept playing this video that we had created that went alongside, that would just interject, and it would cut into the song "Take Me to Church." And I kept thinking about that and how he has made it and that motivation. And that's when I thought to myself, right, I'm going to do everything I can to return to New York and to get a job there. I want to work there, because it lights me up. As much as I love hiking and love being in the outdoors, I also really love being in a city, and New York really does that for me. And it was a song that I had on repeat, and his words on repeat. And I was very laser focused, and I ended up getting my dream job in my dream agency in New York. And that was a huge moment of achievement for me.
And so you reach the pinnacle of what you set out to do, which is incredible. And then you decide, do you know what I'm going to do? I want to go and live in a camper van. And that's quite some change.
It really is, isn't it? It's a stark contrast, because to paint a picture of when I got the job in New York and when I was working there, it's just crazy long hours. Advertising, like many jobs, is like incredibly demanding. You're in the office early, you're in there like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you're not arriving home until 11. American working culture as well is tough. You get 10 days off each year for annual leave, and I didn't take any of them. I was not because it felt like I couldn't, but maybe in a way it was the culture that I was surrounded in. But I was just so enveloped in work, and my identity was also enveloped in work and climbing up that corporate ladder. And that inner child in me that was like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be a businesswoman, was the voice in my head that was like, right, one day the ultimate dream would be to become the CEO of an advertising agency, and advertising in particular, again, because it married the two things that I loved. It was like that creativity, but also that strategic thinking that in many ways has just come natural to me, and I get excited by it. And that's what I wanted to do. But then, with the long hours and everything, you start, and again, in New York, there's also like this materialistic lifestyle. So I will hold my hands up and say that I bought too many clothes, too many shoes, had a lot of emphasis on material things. And I also think, when I reflect on it, I think it was coming from a background where we didn't have a lot and we barely had enough, that as soon as I got a job that gave me the opportunity, I was getting those paychecks every 2 weeks, and I was in New York and all of this, I thought, oh, I've made it. And I was filling this void with all of this stuff because I felt that those physical material things were the signs of success. And so I think it was a couple of years later that I stumbled upon YouTube videos of minimalism, and how that was, I don't know how I stumbled upon it, but I thought that's a really interesting concept. And once you go down that rabbit hole, you start coming up with like tiny home videos, also boat life, van life. And I thought, well, that is really interesting. Imagine being in a tiny little space, which I'm very comfortable with and have always been comfortable with, because my mom and I have always lived in tiny places, and we've lived in bed sits. So I know how to be very strategic with things, and storing things under the bed and etc. And working in small spaces. And I thought I could do that. And you get to travel, which is again something that my mom had instilled with me, being like, if you get an opportunity, do it. And you can do it on a scrappy budget, but go and see the world, because you can. And that's why that had the appeal to van life. It was the freedom, and but also it felt like a pipe dream, because one, I didn't have a van, nor a driving license, and it was how would you even make that work? Because I had two conflicting identities, right? I had the climbing up the corporate ladder, working really hard, long hours, etc., having no life work balance at all. And to be completely candid with you, I was completely happy to do that. I was completely happy to give up my evenings and even my weekends to work, because I felt like I was getting the buzz of doing well, and the pat on the back. I had that, and at the same time I wondered about a life that could be more simple and more freeing, and just could give me the opportunity to travel to these places that I couldn't otherwise go. And that was the seed that was planted in my head. Again, it was a pipe dream until I met Adam, and he had a van, and he had the same dream. So it was just a no-brainer.
And honestly, I said it during Adam several times as well, that for those that have yet to go and look at Jits into the Sunset on YouTube, or go check out the podcast as well. Start with a YouTube 100%, and just go and see the absolute magic that Adam and Tania have created. It's something really beautiful, and it's an amazing, I guess, a photo album of your travels, in the most expansive, beautiful way, and it's something to behold. So I can't recommend that you go and check that enough. One thing, Tania, that I didn't ask Adam, I want to ask you is, in your travels, you must experience so much world music in all of these different places where you wake up each day and such. But one of the things, correct me if I'm wrong, when you do your little van tours and such, I can't see a stereo in Jits. Is there one?
Oh yeah, we do have a stereo in Jits, actually. Don't worry. I'll make sure that we have brilliant sound. He's all about the bass. Since we met, he was like, "Can you feel that in your chest? Look at the bass." So yes, we do have one. And actually, we've recently upgraded to a much bigger one because the bass is the best, and it's a whopper of a stereo. So yeah, it's very important that there is good sound when we're playing our music in a teeny tiny van that definitely doesn't need it, but it's yeah, it makes it feel more like home.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Issa, do you like put together like little playlists and stuff for each adventure, or do you just sort of make them up on the go?
Oh, Adam is the king of playlists. We actually have a playlist for I think it's called Road Trip Chill Playlist, and also like a summer playlist, which we've made public and we share with our community. And I think we have one of them has nearly 1,000 hearts, or people have favorited it. And so we have our go-to playlists that we love to put on whilst we're driving, whilst we're cooking. But actually, to be fair, now more and more we're starting to spend a lot of time listening to podcasts and audiobooks as well. But yeah, the playlist, you can't go wrong. He takes all the credit for them because
Okay.
they're bang on.
So you touched on something that you said, the community, and so give me a little sort of snapshot as to a community that I'm very keen to become part of. But tell me a little bit of the sort of the change from working in, you know, that corporate life that you had, you know, working every hour, to then living in the van. But then tell me about the people that you've come into contact now and that community, and how freeing has that been? And just give me like a little bit of an insight into the community of van lifers.
Sure. I think the beautiful thing about van life and the community is that everyone comes from such different backgrounds, and and also different stages in life, because some of the people that we feel the most inspired by are people that are in their 60s or 70s
Shout out
who
the
have this.
retirement rebel. Shout her out.
Yes, yeah, she's brilliant. Siobhan Daniels, yeah. She was brilliant. She was one of our guests on our podcast, and I mean she's just a great speaker, and she's just a fabulous, inspiring woman. But exactly, just stories like Siobhan and other people on the road, is that van life doesn't have an age. And it's something that I think if you look at social media and you search the hashtag van life, often you'll come across pictures of people in their 20s, you know, and they're living in these like really beautifully decorated vans. And also like they have ridiculous things, in my opinion, like tiles or like massive sinks, or like really heavy sinks, and you know, the picture perfect. And I mean, good for them. But really and truly, when you get out there, you meet so many just kind of normal people living in scrappy vans like ours as well. And yeah, I love the fact that it is from, you know, people from different age groups and different backgrounds. And actually, one of the things that we notice as we were starting to share our journey is that we would start getting emails from people that were in their 40s or in their 70s, and you'd have someone message us in their 40s being like, "Oh, I love watching your travels, but I'm too old and I wish that I could you know, I could go and turn back time and get off and go." And you know, and then we'd have people that would be older that would have started their travels and are taking up things like hiking or while swimming, or you know, they're bird watching, whatever it is. And we just thought, you guys need to talk to each other. So we started a Facebook group that, you know, for over 50, so that people could share their stories. And for those that are van curious, um, and maybe feeling like, oh, I'm too old for this, because when I look on social media, people are much younger. That they could connect with others and actually go, no, there's no age limit to this. Like, adventure keeps you young, and it's a fabulous way to live, retirement age or not. And likewise, we also say to you know, people that are younger or people that are our age, we say like, you don't have to wait for your retirement to dip your toe into van life, because
Yeah.
it's, you know, your future and your retirement is not guaranteed. And if that is what you want to do, and it's very much the story for Adam and I, we wanted to explore, we wanted to travel, and the trajectory that I was going, at least I was, you know, good job, working up the corporate ladder, saving up for my retirement. And it's like, oh, what would I do with my time when I would retire and that money? And it would be go traveling in a van. So it was like, well, why don't I do that now? So the community, to go back to your question about the community, very supportive on social media as well. We were stuck on a Portuguese farm during the pandemic for 3 months, and the community and the strength of the van life community was incredible to see, because there were many people that we had never met in person, but that we were speaking to online in Instagram DMs, and we were all helping each other. I don't have a place to stay. Does anyone know someone in the south of France? Or just, and so it's very, very supportive, because it's a very unique lifestyle when it involves you cleaning out your poop and chasing after resources. It's very unique.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I'm going to ask you for your last track now, please, and that's the song that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear, please.
Yes, I'm going to go with Signals by, and I think this is how you pronounce his name, Junius Mavant. He is an Icelandic singer-songwriter. And this was a song that I discovered through one of the playlists that Adam made. And it is always on repeat. His vocals and his it's a very emotional track, and it makes me feel inspired. I guess those would be the words to describe it. And I don't think that as many people that should know his work, and in particular the song, have heard of it. So I hope that someone listening will find it and love it too.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Iceland is one of the most magical places on the planet as well.
Oh, yes.
Can't shout out Iceland enough. It's amazing. Okay, well, we make it easy for people to find that track, Tania, because we put together a little Spotify playlist to accompany this podcast with all the tracks that we've spoken about today. Moving forwards, so from what I gather from the podcast and from YouTube, Jits is looking like she's not too far from retirement at some point. So, so what's coming up? What's the new adventure? What can we expect from you and Adam this year?
We are heading off backpacking. Our first stop is Indonesia, and we're hoping to go to places like Japan, Nepal, maybe go to places like Madagascar. We would love to go to Africa on safari. When we went to Costa Rica last year, we just loved being around wildlife. So that is something that we definitely will be chasing this year. And we both recognize how lucky we are that now, somehow, some way, I don't know how it's happened, but this has become our job as well as our lifestyle. So we get to decide of like, what are the places that inspire us? What are the places that we can tell interesting stories and really shine a light on the culture of the place, and go hiking in their national parks and do these type of adventures and share with other people. And so that really has now dictated our future travel plans, which are constantly in flux. But yeah, we're really excited. So backpacking, and then depending on how Jits does, we might do a couple more Jits trips. Otherwise, fitting out a new van, building off an off-grid homestead, but travel and adventure will always be a part of it.
Oh, well, whatever it is, I can't wait to watch it, because as mentioned before, you used to have been so inspiring and super entertaining to watch your journeys, and long may they continue. Tania, I've had an absolute joy talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere.